Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it. Hey, welcome to The First Turn. I'm Hyena.
I'm Llama.
Today we're talking about some Warhammer stuff. We had a preview happen this weekend from Warhammer World, where they showed off. This one was in Essen, Germany.
Yep.
Where they had their second Golden Demon of the year. So we'll talk about that too. A little bit of news from the week. Well, kind of a quiet side.
We did have our first AOS tournament.
We had a local AOS tourney. Yep, for the new edition at our local store. Went really well.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I surfed the upper bracket, and you might have bodyboarded down the lower bracket.
Down the lower bracket, yep.
We were very opposite ends of the bracket because someone forgot what time we started, so you kind of gave your opponent a bone for showing up late. You kind of
I thought it was doors open at 9, tournament starts at 10, and it was doors open at 8, tournament starts at 9. Whoops. So I just gave my opponent the first win, and
So it was a 3-rounder, really small thing, but myself and our buddy Rhino both played, and the two of us went 3-0 for the tournament.
Good variety too of the armies.
Pretty good. I mean, we had. it was a small event. It was like a 16-person event. I think two people dropped, so it was like 14. Very good diversity. We had I think the only duplicates we had were Stormcast, obviously, because they're so new and they're most popular, and they're Space Marines. Very different play styles, though. At least for me and the other. Well, the other two might have been very similar. Very foot heavy.
One guy I thought sounded like he plays them like Custodes, kind of.
Right.
And then you had Dragon Heavy.
It was all dragons. I had a total of 10 models. So very elite. No, 11 models. Very elite army. And the other two were very similar, where they had lots of infantry. They had some flying guys. They had a couple mounted heroes and that sort of style. I think there was one other dragon present. So
one other Krondus, I think. Yeah,
which just goes to show you, dragons might be more strong than we think, because mine did pretty good. Even against some pretty classic, I would say, kind of meta lists. So I played against my 3 opponents was a Skaven list, which was very heavy into Scryer.
Scryer, yeah.
I was able to assassinate some warp lightning cannons pretty early in that game, so that gave me a massive. Well, I had to, right? That was the whole thing I had to accomplish. Was like, this is what cracks Stormcast Dragons' defenses the most.
For those who don't know, the warp lightning cannon for Skaven only needs to roll a hit, and then it's just mortal damage, which is huge against monsters and stuff like that.
Especially with such a good save and 0 ward. So I just had to kill those quick, and I did, and it kind of.
That was all I had to take out.
It's all I really had to do, because the rest of the army was not a massive threat. Storm Fiends, while cool, are not amazing. Storm Vermin, while good, are overexpensive, so they don't really perform as well as just clan rats do, because you can get so many more of them, that kind of thing. Especially with when you've got support that can actually buff them. The buffs just tend to go better on clan rats, because it multiplies by more models.
So that player, who's a younger guy, college guy, he's super excited about the game. And he got into Age of Sigmar first because he played Total War Warhammer, the video game.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
And then came into the light and plays AOS. And he was talking about that. So the Storm Vermin, it was interesting, is like, there are situations where against a lot of infantry, especially if you charge into them, they're really good. And they'll throw so many blades, like 60 attacks if you have a reinforced unit. Although I don't know if 20 is the right way to go with them. But he made a note that like they just felt fine,
right,
until it's like. But then because he debated playing Kretic, or the character
Kritok, whatever.
Yeah. Because he does so much for Storm Vermin.
Right. He's the Storm Vermin hero.
Yeah.
Specifically, he has an aura of +1 to wound, which is pretty massive for them.
And because so it's funny is they were able to paper cut like some Varangard out of the game. After the Varangard like kind of swept up a side, but he made the decision to go Scryer heavy, and like Kretic just didn't really fit in there. And so,
I also think his Vermin Lord Warp Seer didn't really fit there.
Right.
If he went more like, I don't know, go Warbringer instead, then you could actually have some synergy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with just Stormvermin, what they want to do, they want to go up the front and fight, because the Warp Seer is just not fighty enough.
No.
Right? Like he's
and it was evidenced by when something big got into that, he had to keep fighting away with him because he wasn't good at like hero fighting or anything. Right. Sneaky guy, but yeah, we had that Skaven player. We had a Daughters of Cain player.
Yep.
We had
we saw Marathi on the table. That was,
she is the army itself. I know isn't doing too hot right now, and I could see a lot of it was kind of made of paper. Mm-hmm. Marathi herself is still every bit of 760 points. She's just a beast. And then we had Soulblight Gravelords.
It's times two. Very, very, very different lists.
But yeah, one was Wolf and Blood Knights.
Yep.
And then one was
lots of Graveguard.
Yeah. So
it was Mortis Engine, double unit of Graveguard, unit of Skeletons, double units of Wolves plus. He's so good. What's his name? Big boy, Radiger.
Oh yeah,
Radiger the beast, the evolved version, and then that guy actually had the Monster Hunter one. I forget her name.
Vordry
the girl with the swarm of bats. That named one.
Right.
She hunts monsters. She lowers their attacks, characteristics, and stuff. She's really, really good. She like hampers them.
We had We had a Gloomspite Gitz player. We had a Disciples of Tzeentch player.
Yep.
And we had a Lumineth Realm Lords player.
Yep.
So it was like that's what we wanted to see was this marked variety of stuff. And so obviously there would have been room for there wasn't room with only 16 possible entries to have everything represented, but we saw variety. Everybody was having fun. There were a lot of good games. And then everybody nerded and talked about it after. Mm-hmm. That's the best. You get them excited for the next thing. You get them excited to buy the next stuff. Which, speaking of, we learned a little bit about what's coming. Stormcaster finally up for...
We did. Yeah, so this today, Sunday, we're recording, because yesterday was such a busy day for us.
Yeah.
Which is fine, because it allows us to get the preview out of the way and digest that a little bit and things like that. We now have the Stormcast reinforcement side of the campaign finally coming out. Skaven, obviously last time, tons of stuff. The Stormcast is everything we've seen so far.
Yeah.
It's all the new cavalry, the single kits for both Reclusians, the great weapons and normal. I saw they were doing the redeemed Knight in what's his name? Knight Azeros
with the big
model.
wings.
Yeah. So he's coming. Which I wasn't sure he was coming at the same time. You have the guy riding the Griffin. You got the heavy armored Griffin riders. All of it. It's going to be up for pre-order next weekend, which is sweet because I've been looking forward to that.
And their Battle Tome, which is
another big,
another
big chunk of models. Woof.
Yeah. And then they did the announcement at least of
Slaves to Darkness.
Slaves to Darkness.
Now, I didn't thoroughly go through their announcement for that. Did they confirm that all they're getting is a new sorcerer model, or is it all we've seen so far?
They showed us the book, and they showed us, the new Warcom site. As a side note, I've noticed just simply hasn't been working very well on Google Chrome on mobile.
Right.
So I've either had to go to desktop or I've had to use like an entirely different browser on my phone to get it to pull. But as far as the announcement, where to go?
So while you're looking, I know they have a yearly event model, Warhammer Plus one, that is a unique sculpt for a Chaos Sorcerer that looks very similar to the new one coming out, but just in a different pose. A little weird to me though, just because they are pumping out these Chaos Sorcerers. It's like they had a bunch of different designs, but they didn't know which one to go with. So they're deciding to like, well, we have these events coming out where we can release individual models for them. Let's just do all the cool designs we came up with this character. Because the Warhammer Plus one, where you had all like the familiars,
for last year,
was also a Chaos Sorcerer, right?
And some people will play it as their Sorcerer Lord.
Absolutely.
The Underworld's Warband
had one.
Yep.
They had the original weird little like horned head guy, which I hate. I kept bashed one of my own out of the War Shrine Priest, my muscle wizard.
Yeah, well now there's no shortage of them because they decided we're going to make these like Space Marine.
So I'd have like 5 or 6 sorcerers now.
But I'm going to get them all.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Can't help it.
Yeah, and they even used the word another. They were like, because Zarketh Bane of Law is this year's Warhammer Day miniature. But there's also another brand new Chaos Sorcerer Lord miniature. Another brand new to accompany the Battle Tome. And then it says outfitted in the modern Slaves to Darkness style, which is
Yep.
key because he looks more shammy.
He does. I mean, he's still wielding a sword, so he's still very much like a fighter.
Still a lord.
So my only issue with the previous, sorcerer, was that he was too.
Well, he was gangly.
Yeah, he was too like books. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, I'm a chaos warrior who dabbles in magic. I'm a learned bookman who's on the battlefield with all these actual
And
warriors.
like part demonic-ish.
Yeah. And so, like, I never really liked him, like the idea of him. This one feels very much like a Stormcast, right? Where it's like, I am a warrior who does magic as well.
Well, it's,
you know?
it's the, for those who are familiar with the 40K universe, it's the Erebus character, right?
Right.
You were a warrior who then chaos gifted this way.
Right.
And it even says, like, rugged gear that leans more shamanic than scholarly. He's a mage who lives for battle. And so it makes me wonder also if his profile's just going to look different in the new. He might be like not Wizard 2, like a good wizard in another army.
Sure.
He might be Wizard 1, but maybe he fights better.
I mean, I think he's super cool if he can, like, supercharge himself.
Okay.
To be like +1 damage, +1 hit, +1
That'd be
wound.
something.
Something. Like, maybe all three, where he, like, supercharges his attacks and, like, goes in with 3 or 4 swings and is all buffed up.
They give him 2 different heads, 2 different staff tops,
Yep.
which is great. And then the new Spearhead for Dark Oath specifically, which is neat. It'll be neat to see them play Spearhead. Still a great way to play.
It's a very low-cost spearhead,
Why
though.
does it has to be?
Because it's, like, 140 for the War Queen.
She's 140, 150 for the Fell
Yeah,
Riders.
so that's 290 plus the 2 units of Dark Oath, which are at
100
most
points.
100.
It's 100 for the regular Dark Oath, and the Savagers are like 110, even though they're worse.
So it's like a 500 point spearhead. Whereas most spearheads are in like the 750 to 800 point range. This one's 500. That's rough.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to work unless their rules are just crazy. I don't know. I maybe it'll be something where it's like, well, with this spearhead, we're doing something different. When you reinforce the units, they come back at full strength. That's their benefit. Or when you do the reinforcement thing, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and then it doesn't give a date for release. It just says we'll be covering the contents of the Battle Tome closer to release. It didn't say if there'd be any of their models. Usually they try to tease that, so we might just be getting model in a book.
Model in a book. Back to that. Yeah.
Which
is disappointing with the announcement that so much of the Warriors of Chaos, the Chaos Warriors, are going back to Old World. Right? Like the old, elbows tucked in Chaos Warriors that we used to use, and the Manticore Lord, the old Lord on foot, the old Sorcerer on foot, like all those the chariots, all those old models that were from Fantasy that we were used to and we were using in AOS. All of a sudden, they're popping back. So it's like, well, are they staying though? Are they being replaced? Are there new things coming out that's going to fill their role? Because if you just lose those kits, I mean, we obviously have new Chaos Warriors, but like if you lose some of those kits, it's like you just trim the roster down. Now there's less options, and it's like those filled a role.
Further, there are some things like the Demon Engine thing, the Soul
Grinder.
Soul Grinder
Doesn't belong there.
that I wish wasn't even in the game.
Yeah.
And so if they were going to trim anything, trim that. But I also wonder if their formations are going to change. And the reason I say that is because one of the battle formations, everyone only used the God's Wrath Warband right now. It's the only one you use.
It's so good.
It's the best one. And the Dark Oath one is too niche. You have to play almost exclusively Dark Oath, and it just lets you treat them like clan rats where they come back. But otherwise, no buffs. And then there's another one that could be useful, but it specifically revolves around benefiting a demon prince and a bunch of monsters.
Right. What monsters?
And that's just it. Now you're down to the Slaughter Brute and the Mutilith Vortex Beast.
I think technically the Mind Stealer Sphinx is a monster.
The Formeroid Crusher.
And the Formeroid Crusher might be.
But they're all singleton, small wound count. And so that's why I had hoped, like, well, if the Manticore is going away, maybe they'll give us something new.
Right.
We've seen all these armies, like Cities of Sigmar and Stormcast, get these new beasties, and we thought, well, maybe they'll do one like that where you get a named guy and a generic version, give us a new monster, or just a new unridden dragon or something for Chaos.
And what happened to that? What happened to the slave beasts we don't like to use the word slave, but there are beastmasters there that trap and tame monsters and just use them to fight
corrupt them,
and maybe they're not as good. They might have the companion keyword in the game, so they're not as effective. They can't be benefiting from buffs and stuff. But it's like this is a hard hitting, thrashing, fast moving
violent monster
unit that I need my army to have in order to fight some things. Like infantry can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
I've got no shooting in that army.
No.
And now I don't have any monsters in the army. It's like, what do I have? If I don't want to run Varangard and Chosen, what else is there that does damage, really?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we'll see. And so so they set that one up. And the reason why that formation even exists is because a lot of monsters that had companion keywords everywhere couldn't benefit from the Eye of the Gods table. But the Demon Prince was the way around that, because he can just pick a friendly and then say, you share my mark, you get this thing. And then the Undivided keyword did stuff like versus monsters and heroes. So that would be the incentive, but now you've got no units to put in that army. So that's weird to me. So unless there's something down the road, which if there is, then don't make this book the next one out.
Right.
Like, wait until those models come around.
Look what happened with Iron Jaws,
I don't mind mid-edition releases.
Yeah.
I don't.
But look what happened with Iron Jaws. They had that book come out, and it was like, oh, yeah, by the way, we've got all these updates for you that didn't make it to the book. It's like, well, then wait.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this new pig riding unit. And makes 3 different kinds of units. Also, new brutes of 2 different kinds. Also, new Ardboys, plus a new character, plus a new named character. It's like, this is such a massive update for Iron Jaws. Why couldn't you have done this with the book? Push the book back so that it get, it's
I think
wild.
on the show we've talked about our displeasure with the delays that paper create and how that leads to stuff
Absolutely.
like that. Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's like you're not able to line up your release schedules because things take time to make, and you make things too early, and then you're like, oh well, then we have these plans for this other thing, but do we really want to delay a book 6 months and have it be that much more out of date?
Right.
Or just recycle the whole thing and waste that money?
Yeah. Or the reverse. The book was printed 8 months ago, but the models weren't slotted for production yet. So we're going to release the book and then in a year update them with a bunch of models.
Yeah.
So it is a little awkward. I mean, that said, if they eventually get new stuff like that, that's fine. On the pure speculation side, and then I guess we can move to the weekend's events, is like we've talked about how we think in AOS 4, speaking of things that have gone back to Old World, that we think that this is the edition of the game where Games Workshop has really decided what this game and the setting is, aesthetically, lore-wise, and how it's going to play.
Yeah.
Because the rules are not only far more fleshed out and succinct than they were perfect, but than they were in the previous editions. But I think in terms of what factions are staying and which ones aren't, what units are staying, which ones aren't, I think we're getting that scope. Well,
so I think we're hoping they've made a commitment, right? I think that's the idea we're kind of leading towards. I think we're seeing some hints, right? Hoping we see some hints of there was a drawing board where they had, all the factions that got ported over from Fantasy into AOS, and they said, okay, what can we keep and what can we get rid of? What makes sense to take back to Old World because that's a thing.
Yep.
And we need something to be in it, right? What can we cut and what can we move around? And I think they had settled on these 2 factions because their winning rates are all over the place.
Yep.
Either they're way too good for no reason or they're just
unplayably bad.
Yeah. So it's one of the 2. And so I think that they said, well, these factions make way more sense being in the Old World because their ideologies are based on Old World elements. Morceleb the Moon is what the Beastmen kind of followed, right? Like that doesn't exist in AOS.
Nope.
The version of Beastmen in AOS are not the same thing as what they used to have, and so it's weird to try to cram their lore into it.
Yep.
Of following chaos when it's like, well, they really don't.
No.
They've got their own agendas that kind of are chaotic, but that just sounds like orcs, right? That just sounds like destruction in this world. Why are they even of chaos? Yes, there are marked beastmen and there are marked, whatever, but there are marked humans, right? You don't need to have Zangors and Slangors be a part of a Beastmen army,
right?
Because they don't really follow chaos really in AOS. It's just it's odd.
And in a lot of the more recent fluff where the beasts in particular appeared, they had largely been wiped out.
Yeah.
Like their incursions were nil.
Yeah.
Like they were.
And so, but I think part of that writing is being like, oh, well, they're getting
It's going hand in hand.
They're getting
Yeah.
defeated, and so they're not represented in the game anymore.
Yeah.
They're not a faction. They're not a major player in this game because we've written them out of it.
And on the business side, I'm sure they also looked at things as like from the time AOS 1 launched until now, it was like maybe sales weren't great.
Sure.
Most people just had brought their minis over and didn't plan on starting them anew.
I wonder if they even looked at like tournament results and like
Maybe.
play results of like how many people are even
right,
playing these armies
right.
and bringing these armies. And it's like, well, these are some of the lower performing, lower played armies, and yes, some of them can top, but 9th edition Tau topped some lists, but had a very low win rate overall and a very middling play rate. So it's like you can't like base it on that. It's like because we know there was a Beast of Chaos army that won a GT last year.
Yep.
Or it was this year after the announcement of them being sent back to
right,
Old
and
World.
everyone hard about it.
Yeah. So that was funny. But I think those two got like, okay, well here's the pile of things we're gonna keep. Here are the ones that can go. Similar to like they did with AOS when it first came out, when they were like, all right, well, what doesn't fit in this new setting? Well, Tomb Kings definitely don't fit. Bretonnia definitely does not fit.
Right.
So like those two were gotten rid of from this world because they just didn't fit the setting. I'm assuming with them cutting these two, they're saying, okay, well the rest of these do fit the setting, because if they didn't, we'd put them in that pile as well.
Because we speculated, because when they've decided with Old World to bring the world that was back in a different time, they picked a very specific part of the map they want to represent in the game, and Beasts and Bone Splitters both fit there still. And so they still have a home, you know, and Tomb Kings fit there, and all of that stuff still fits there. But in this new one, I think you're right. I think that proverbial drawing or a hypothetical drawing board, and we talked even a couple of years ago, I think, that we wondered if Skaven were going to stick, because they went AOS 2 and AOS 3 getting nothing new. Their rules almost didn't even change from one to the next.
Yep.
And so it was like, I bet they were probably on the drawing board, and they decided
the board, like the book art never changed.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh man, how?
Yeah, and
25-year-old models, no updates in this game. Like, I don't know.
And I think you might have heard on some dark corner of the internet, like last year, murmurings that Skaven would be featured in some big release,
right?
And then it happened that this edition, they're the bad guy,
right?
Or they're leading the bad guy charge, because all of Chaos is kind of like benefiting from it, and then we saw their commitment to Skaven and AOS was by AOSifying the aesthetic, and here's 1,000 new models.
Yep.
And so I think the other question mark army is the Ogre Maw tribes, because they've gone most of AOS without much attention, although they did get Gorgers and a Hunter not that long ago.
They got a Tyrant a while back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of characters that need to be updated. But I think you're right. I think it's kind of the stamp of approval that they're in there for now, or hopefully forever, by the fact they didn't get cut.
And they weren't even talked about when GW was saying, here's what we're looking to do.
Yep. And so, with Skaven, like you said, it's like they give them the approval. It's like, here, yes, we're committing to you staying here, because they were very much an old world army.
Yep.
They were very core to that.
By their models, they were super old world.
But to the story of everything, all the events that happened in that world were very Skaven centric in one way or another. But yes, this was like, we're keeping them. This is solidified. They're here now. I want to see one more, detail of being like committing to ogres.
Same. And I think one of the biggest commitments they made for Skaven, besides all the new models and giving them that big part of the story, is when you make named characters that are entirely new and within this setting.
Yeah.
And, we saw with Warriors of Chaos, they separated. So it's not just Archaon that came over. Now you've got these two new characters, Eternus, Abraxia, right? And then it's
Be'lakor.
Be'lakor's been around forever, right?
Yeah.
But for ogres, that's what they don't have any of right now. No named characters. And they're mortals, so we don't need to bring Greasus back or whatever. Yep. Give them a new player. Show us you're committing to them being in this setting.
You're right. Because Skaven got two more. Physic Scour and we were talking about Cratonic Foulblade. Like two new named characters that lead factions.
Who are relevant. Yeah.
Good. That's how you do it.
Yep.
Give us new named people to like ground them into this current era in that game.
And people love the named characters, even when they're like, I guess, not very good. If you're going to think about competitive playability, but
Right.
but they're fun and they're flavorful. The models are just, they rarely ever aren't center PC good,
Right.
especially in the Age of Sigmar side. And so I think they make a commitment like that to Ogres. You know, Stormcast and Skaven obviously get the lion's share of stuff right now. Slaves, I think, is the only other army getting a new book this year.
Yeah.
But
I think it's Gloomspite early next year.
and then Gloomspite.
I think
Okay.
it was something like that.
And they have some stuff that could still be updated. Their night
Sure.
goblins are very old.
Well, they need to decide what to do with the spiders.
and then the spiders,
Because
right?
the spiders are weird.
We've heard a rumor that the wolves might get the wolf
Well,
riders might get
I
expanded
think we
upon.
extrapolated on that because there were rumor engines that showed very clearly the same kind of bits that were on the, what are they called? Snarl fangs,
Right. Yeah.
That one-off unit that they had, of,
Which I
of
think has
Wolf
its own
Riders.
keyword.
Yeah,
now.
or it doesn't have one yet, but it has no
Okay,
keyword
okay.
that's shared with the.
That's what I
gets.
mean. I think it's got
Yeah,
like
it's-
Snarl Fang keyword, but
it's-
no one
it's gonna-
else's.
Yeah, and so what we're thinking is that maybe they'll get some kind of an update because there is new bits being shown off for the same aesthetic as them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll get some support. We'll get wizards. We'll get melee versions of them. We'll get.
And you know,
who knows?
What might happen as a result, and this could be sad.
We might lose the spiders.
The whole spider
Yeah.
faction might go back to Old World.
Right.
Along with, believe it or not, regular like night goblin stuff.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like Skaven got new clan rats
Sure.
and Stormverm. Like time for new AOS goblins.
I can
Be
see
a
that.
great kit.
I mean,
first of all.
we've got all the squigs. We got all the
Yep.
trolls.
Yep.
I mean, the fellwater trolls, the old fishy ones, are good enough
They are.
for AOS.
By the way, they're pretty good in the game.
Yeah. But like beyond that, it's like, okay, well, we need to get rid of the spider stuff because that's all old and it's not getting updated. It was available in one box at one time. And
Yep.
they never re-released. I don't think you can buy spider riders right now, can you?
I don't think so. Or they're just always out of stock.
So that's a little weird.
Yeah.
Maybe you can. I don't remember. I haven't looked in a while.
And the Ragnarok kit still looks fine.
It does.
But
the goblins that ride the Ragnarok do not look
No.
fine. Man, they are
and you
rough.
know, if they ported that back to the old world, that's fine.
Yep.
And then you expand on that Snarlfang side, and now your gets, much like your Oryx, now have like these three distinct things within
Right.
the same faction.
You got the wolf riders, you got the squig riders, the cave beasts,
You
and
got
now
the
you got the
trogs.
trolls.
Yeah.
So that would be that'd be enough, I think.
But I wouldn't be surprised when ogres come around if they get a pretty big expansion.
Yeah.
Some old models get updated, and then an expansion on there.
I would assume some are going to get cut,
They might,
right? They're going to get rid of man eaters.
right? The mercenary metal guys, yeah.
It's odd. Buy them one at a time. And
They-
they're
even their- even their-
they're a unit of 3, and you buy them one at a time. It's weird.
Well, even their standard gluttons might get updated.
Yeah, I hope
'Cause that's-
so.
that's an aged
Because
kit.
like what we noticed with the newer kits, like the Mongolian sort of aesthetic is kind of going away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where they don't have these like barbarous blades, the big
And
wide
Fu
like
Manchu, yeah.
and the Fu Manchus and
Right.
that kind of, you know, very stereotyped
Yep.
sort of look, because that's what they were before. They were like
Right.
that was their sort of culture. They were nomadic peoples.
But their lore
You know?
in AOS is different, and so I could see them changing the look of the core infantry, and they would have to do just two kits that are like dual purpose,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then give us named characters, one or
Yep.
two,
Yep.
and then and who knows? But we don't know when they're coming.
I don't think anyone does.
No.
I think it's at this point it's hope. It's
Wish listing a little bit?
You know, it's when you put the pins on the board and you're like drawing lines with string.
With string.
You know, and you're
Yep.
coming to a conclusion based on all these different things that connect. I think that's part what we're doing, right?
Yes.
A little bit conspiratorial.
Yep.
You know, but
Circles and
but
codes
I
and-
absolutely want it to be the case. You know.
Yep.
Because it's like it's a cool faction. I
Sometimes-
just love it to stay.
Sometimes our crazy theories end up exactly what they do, and
Yeah.
and it's nice. And then we don't speak of the ones that didn't and act like we never did.
I don't think I've ever been wrong.
No. Nope.
Not once.
Doesn't happen.
Don't go look back at our previous episodes to
Don't
try to
listen to
find
any
anything we've gotten wrong.
Even-
I promise it's not there.
Even
but
if
go
we
look
said
anyway.
something and then the next week had to correct that very thing.
You know what? In fact, I will say this. Let me know if you find anything we got wrong. And I want specifics and give me episode numbers,
Episode numbers, timestamps.
timestamps. Let me know where I got something wrong.
Yeah.
In the comments, please.
No.
But yeah, love to see that. And then I think we've kind of gotten with that like a pretty solid core of factions. Some of the fat gets trimmed. You know, some of the things that work. But I think that kind of paves the way too for like maybe some some room for additional things, right? Like, because what we were saying with Beasts of Chaos not really feeling like Beasts of Chaos, they do feel like Beasts of Destruction. You know, we had Kragnos, who was a weird character to be released on his own and be a new Nagashi sort of character for every destruction faction.
Right.
It was odd, an odd thing to come out of nowhere, right? For a part of a campaign, and then what does he do? He does nothing but then get headbutted back to where he came from.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that headbutted things. That's a callback
to meme.
Yeah,
Warhammer,
for one of the
yeah.
what is it? It was actual Warhammer fantasy campaign where
Storm of Chaos.
Storm of Chaos. Yeah. Which was, oh my gosh, that was some kind of writing.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for a 20-year-old campaign. It ends with Grimgor Ironhide headbutting Archeon and being satisfied that he bested the biggest Yumi, and leaves and goes home.
And then Chaos also left.
And then campaign over, because Chaos is like, oh man, we got punched by an orc.
Yep.
And they turned around and they went home.
Yes.
It's like, what? What kind of dumb shit was that?
Yep.
The orcs who conquered their way to meet Chaos just gave
and Chaos, who conquered all the way through the Empire to get to Altdorf or whatever.
Grimmer just wants to prove a point.
Yep.
Not just hurt him or kill him. He wants to headbutt him.
Yep.
And he does.
You is weak, he says.
And he does. And then they walk home.
Yep.
It's like, are you kidding me? So after all that campaign, nothing changed.
Nope.
And
populations weren't decimated.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Empire kept all their territory.
Yeah. So at least with the recent campaigns, we've actually seen some. Cadia fell, right?
Cadia fell.
That was a result of a campaign result that the community played in. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, those are great.
You know, but with this room being made, you know, kind of in the production space, maybe we will see something like a new destruction faction that is beast people, not beastmen, but beast men who are centaurs, who are satyrs, who are like any variety of like half animal, half human hybrid people that follow Kragnos, right? I mean, he becomes now a faction leader, and he's got a faction that does something very similar to what the Beasts of Chaos did.
Or maybe what they'd wanted to, but never got there.
Right.
Yeah.
So we might see something like that. And I think an idea like that is too hard to pull off with the Beasts of Chaos existing, right? Because they're there, it's like, well, we can't release this new thing. It's just too similar.
Right.
You know, we need to either not release it for the Beasts of Chaos, and then it doesn't fit, or we need to get rid of Beasts and then release this.
Well, and it was like, look at how long it took for them to do the Dark Oath to get rid of the old Marauders kind of thing, and it could be something similar. They might have had designs on this, draws and CADs and everything for another faction for a long time, but it's about finding the. But again, this is strings and whatever like this. Yep.
We have no confirmation on this.
Nope.
But I still think it's a pretty damn good estimation of what's going on. A really good guess. Dwarfs getting sent back to Old World. Yep. I expect to see them leave Says Sigmar.
Yep.
Because gyrocopters and gyrobombers are in both games right now currently,
and they don't like that.
They don't like that. Hammerers and iron breakers and iron drakes and all those, like old dwarfs, either they need to figure out a way to reconcile them and put them in the old world, and find something new or cut them from the AOS faction, or find some way to do dwarven holds.
Yep.
In AOS and bring them and leave those models in and then expand it, kind of how they did with Daughters of Cain or something, something like that. So we'll see. I'm hopeful. Like I see the cutting of them as like a positive thing.
It's a pruning to me, is what it is.
Because when they came up with the Iron Jaws weird brute Rekkas, that brute unit with the pig faction release, they seemed a lot like, well, these models should have been just updates for Bone Splitters. Why are these models in Iron Jaws? That's a weird design choice. That's a weird choice to put them in there. These have been great additions to that army. Well, then we knew, they got cut, so they had to probably redesign them to make them fit into Iron Jaws.
And that could be twice that's happened.
Yeah, because you've got your Beast Snagga boys, who I swear, I'm telling you, Beast Snaggas were originally designed for Bone Splitters, and they decided years ago not to continue Bone Splitters.
Yep.
And they pivoted to 40K with them. Because they make no damn sense in 40K. Nope. None at all. It doesn't make any sense.
They still don't.
Still now. Anyway, that aside.
They make for good-looking paint jobs.
Sure,
but,
yeah. I mean, if they replaced normal boys with beast nagas and that was just the look of boys now,
Forever,
like I'd be okay with that. But no, boys exist separate from the beast naga boys. Like, it's weird.
Yeah.
But even that aside, like I said, I do think there is room now for more. And I think there were some design choices that they're trying to make that were just overlapping too much with what was already there. That they didn't want to continue. So I'm trying to find positive in the what is ultimately a sad choice.
Someone experiences. There are players who end up experiencing a loss,
right?
When this stuff happens.
You know, the millions of Bone Splitters players out there that GW hates and really wants to stick it to, and who spent thousands of dollars in the last year. Fully buying a Bone Splitters.
In fact, they didn't even buy the Bone Splitters until they heard AOS was getting a 4th edition.
Right.
And then they bought
the entire faction, and then a week later, because GW hates them, they're cutting that army.
Yep.
Because that's we jest, but that's how some people paint this kind of thing.
Yep.
You know, it's like, oh well, they know I just bought the army, so obviously they cut it.
Yep.
It's like, oh, they made their quota, they sold them all, now it's time to get rid of them. Oh, well, they made this unit really good initially, so everyone would buy it, and now because they sold them all, now they can make them suck. Right. It's like, why would they want to make them suck?
They wouldn't.
Like, why? What reason do they have to make a unit so much worse after people have bought them? Like, what do you mean?
Right.
If the armies were selling well, they wouldn't have been.
No,
cut.
there's no.
That's the thing.
That's just it. There's no incentive to cut it if they're successful. Right. And even then there's a fork. There's a decision tree. It's like, this army's not succeeding and not selling well. Well, what if we make them better?
Right.
And then they sell.
Right. Or we can do better. We need to get these other ones out of here so we can do better.
Yeah. And it's also the aesthetic of the models in AOS that I think they're really setting in stone in AOS 4. Right. You're getting now to where there's less and less stuff that looks out of place or old,
right?
Which I think is a good thing.
Now, I wouldn't mind if they had something cool where, because the way they've done list building now in this edition, you commit to a faction. There are like very specific small groups of models with no options available, right? Regiments of renown is what they call them, which is a term from way back.
It is.
We've had that for a long time, but it's like noteworthy regiment of soldiers that aren't just your own to build, right? They're set a very specific way. You know, they all have names. You don't get to choose your own guys because they all have names already.
They're like a little spearhead you can buy for your army. Yeah.
But every faction, most factions, have something that they can do that can be slotted in as like a mercenary unit to another army. I could see, they have actually one example of this already, that is Gotrek, who does not have a home faction anymore.
Correct.
He's not Caesar Sigmar anymore, which is weird. He is an unaligned, unaffiliated model that you can bring as his own regiment of renown for 360 points, whatever he is. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, that sets the precedent for like, well, what if they came out with a unit or two, or some units, or some other, unaligned, one-off sort of units that can be taken as a regiment of renown.
Because if you consider even lore-wise what he represents now, it's like, well, he doesn't lead, nor is he a part of an army. He's a loner adventurer,
right?
Kind of, and so you could totally make more guys like that.
Or if it was like, here is a man-eater unit for ogres, because we're talking about them. The man-eaters are not part of the ogre army.
Yeah.
They are a regiment of renown.
A mercenary unit.
You can bring, a man-eater captain and 2 units of 3 man-eaters as a regiment of renown that costs 500 points or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like any destruction army, hell, maybe any destruction or order army can hire these mercenary ogres. Anyone but death can hire this mercenary. Because you can do those restrictions.
Sure.
You can do restrictions by army. You can do restrictions by faction, Grand Alliance, whatever. And you could be like, okay, well, here's this unit. We didn't want to get rid of them, but they don't fit in this. Here it is, separate, that anyone can take as a mercenary unit. And we can independently balance that. It doesn't interact with your army's rules. So it's not like, oh, it's really good in this army compared to this army. It's just like supplemental stuff that an army might need. You could say, well, it's a dual-purpose pistol close combat unit that my army lacks, it works really well in it. I'll bring that to supplement what my army's weaknesses are.
And it might even be better to take than functional redundancy of just adding another of the same unit I'm already playing. Yep.
But it's not spammable because you can't bring more than one of it.
Nope, can only bring the one.
And so it's like, you know, maybe that's how they should handle some of those Underworld warbands if they wanted to balance them for...
Those cheap little regiments around.
And so it's like, okay, well, here's this... But they could do that with any of the Underworld's warbands. Or they could say, here's this Underworld warband. It's not part of your army. It doesn't benefit from your army's rules. It's balanced at this point level for these models in there. So it can't be like, oh, well, I'm going to take Zandire's Truthseekers, and they're going to be this sub-faction and benefit from my Stormcast rules. It's like, no, they're a regiment
their own rules. They're their own thing.
Their own thing. Yeah. They get that and nothing else. If you want to play it, you can play with those rules, no options.
And you know what? You keep the same current rules you have in place for regiments right now, where you only get one.
Exactly. You can take one in your army.
So sure, this one might only be 120 points.
Yeah.
That's all you get, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a damn good idea. And it doesn't need you to, like, nerf down those regiments or those units so that they're shit, you know?
Right. That would be a neat way to utilize those for people who don't just want to relegate them to the shelf, or who bought the models but don't have any interest in playing Underworlds.
Right. Or can't really play Underworlds anymore because they're old units.
Right.
Something. You know, any of those reasons.
Which... They announced a new version of the game's coming, and it seems neat. We don't know that much about it. But
there's going to be a new 2-person starter box, which there always is. I like both factions in it because they're Stormcast.
You'll probably get them. Yep.
They both look great. You know, it's a new Ica Claw essentially. He's in the same pose as Ica Claw. I tell you, it was really funny. Spiritual representation.
Successor.
Of him. But then they had a new updated aesthetic too, which I thought was interesting for maybe the Ranger Corps of Stormcast.
Who knows?
They look a little bit like the Vigilors, the guys with the bows, but they've got those like hand crossbow pistols, which I love the new aesthetic. I think it's super cool. There was like a rogue.
There were a lot of people.
There was a Stormcast rogue in there, which
there were a lot of
awesome.
people already showing them on Instagram, and then there were of course some showing how they would convert it to a 40K model. But,
of course,
but there's always someone who does that. But that is its own category, Underworlds at Golden Demon.
Speaking of, that was this week. We mentioned that.
At Essen,
And mixed feelings, because sometimes it's... So I feel for people who have submitted something and maybe it didn't score as well as you wanted. So you were kind of given the opportunity to fix it and do better and submit it again. I didn't like that so many of the kind of the top threes I feel like had already gotten proper recognition in the last Golden Demon.
There were a couple of re-entries that got a pin or a commended award at the previous Golden Demon at Adepticon, and then were maybe reworked or touched up or repositioned, and then they were brought to this one, and 2 of them, at least that I saw, had trophied this time around.
I think there was 2 golds and a silver that I saw that I'm positive I had seen before at Adepticon.
I don't know about the golds. I'm positive the silver, Andy Wardle's unit did, which in person was... So that was in the 40K unit category, 40K unit or kill team category at Adepticon in Chicago, and that category was loaded. There were like 6 or 7 squads that any of them could have won, and his was one. I feel like when you reach that tier where you at least got pinned, like you move on. Then that's where you did. Learn from that.
This is where you this is the state that you submitted it. You got recognition. Do something else. Touching it up and submitting again, and then you got a silver. It's just, I don't know.
That's tough.
I get mixed feelings on it.
So do I.
I mean, it's like, yes, it's tons of hours of time you have to spend doing this, but it's like, but you decided to submit it. And if it wasn't good enough for you at the time, you should have waited. You shouldn't have like taken the feedback and then fixed it and submitted it again. Take the feedback and use it on the next submission. And
I know that's, it's rare for a guy like that. And he's super nice and he's a phenomenal painter. He even addressed it in a post about his own thing.
I'm not trying to call out Andy Wardle.
Nope.
Phenomenal painter.
And he addressed that specific thing about resubmission or the controversy surrounding that. Or
you know what? If we, it's like, If it's a different painting competition, so be it, whatever. Submit all you want. But if it's the same exact painting competition at a different place, maybe you don't go into a normal category. Maybe you get put into open. Something.
Right.
Something so it's like asterisk, you can't be in the running to get Golden Demon Slayer Sword over a model they've already seen, the judges have already seen.
Yeah.
You know, but...
that said, most of the entries were, of course, stunning. I always find Golden Demon, whether it's one I can attend or one I can't, it's always motivating to me. I always like seeing it and then like shooting for something. Now, most of what I saw, outside of a few exceptions, it was just gangbusters paint jobs and not tons of conversions. But one thing I've noticed that people are going above and beyond is the base. Mm-hmm. You can no longer just stand the guy on a pile of slate.
Or you know what? You can, because the Underworld Warband was on their game bases on a plinth.
That was just on a plinth.
You know, so it's like, so maybe, I don't know, maybe you can.
Yeah. And I think for something like that, I think it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think when they're doing like single mini and large, you see the bases they're building. And it was Trevelyan who had once said that like anything you add to a miniature has to make it better if you're talking about Golden Demon. And so if you are going to build a base, you have to do this. Mm-hmm. You either put it on a black plaque and do nothing, or you put it on a base that you treat with as much care as you treat the model itself. And we could see that. I mean, one of our favorite guys, that Albert Moreto Font, who won the Slayer Sword in the UK last year with his Lumineth guy, had an Orc Shaman this year for Age of Sigmar single. He got gold. And if you look, not only did he custom sculpt the mini to look like a bigger, more AOS-y version of the classic Orc Shaman from Fantasy, he said he loves to invoke fantasy in AOS, is why he does that. His Lumineth King looked like a high elf, right? But look at his base. The base he built for that has so much attention paid to it without it drawing from the main figure. But then you examine it and it's like a joy for the judges to look. It's like the mushroom has a face on it. There's like a snake under it, and all of it's painted to the moon. So if you're going to do a base, you have to do that. And that can add to the piece overall, even if they're only supposed to look at the mini itself.
Right.
If you can't do that, then pick a unit and stand them on a plaque.
Right.
Yeah, that's your, because if you can't build that base, that might hurt you in the long run. Because there are a lot of great pieces that don't win awards. I mean, they do. They get commended, notable. They get pins. They have that tier system now. But like to get those three, everything has to be that. There was one more controversy this year that I know about. So if you remember at Adepticon, there was the scanning controversy where
they 3D printed an inverse, like a sort of reflection of
a GW model,
the GW model, the Exiled Vampire. Yeah.
And
it got gold. Like it
won the Slayer Sword.
It got Slayer Sword even.
And so while it was a memorable piece because it was kind of something we hadn't seen before, and it was well executed, but it did create a controversy. GW had to change and there was the guy in 40K single who did the Exodite.
Yeah.
And he did a completely printed background. Well, so GW released a rules packet before this Golden Demon saying like the scanning printing thing, you can do 3D printed bits or terrain pieces or whatever, but you can't do this like faux art in the background that's just a print, AI print, and you can't scan and print in a model that's got IP protection. Mm-hmm. And so most of the entries didn't do anything like that. There was one guy in the Middle Earth category, however, this year, who did a wonderful piece that was Gollum the moment he had gotten the ring back from Frodo after he bit his finger off. And he's standing there looking up at it. Well, they had taken the existing Middle Earth model that was like a special release for that. He had scanned it, said he could play with the scale and size of the ring to make it look bigger so that it's like that shot, and then submitted that as the piece. And unfortunately, his piece then didn't get judged. They let it stay in the case. They don't do anything like that, but they couldn't reward it,
right?
Because he had scanned the piece, an existing GW model, to play with the scale and then do it. But more than that, Games Workshop said, well, the biggest issue was that it's Middle Earth, because Middle Earth's IP is owned by New Line. And if they would have published pictures of it on their GW site on Warhammer Community and given awards to it, New Line could have then come after GW for saying someone scanned our IP.
Right.
And you published it.
Now, what would have happened if he would have scratch built a bigger, thicker arm and a bigger ring?
Right.
Probably would have been fine.
Yep, scratch building is always acceptable.
So that's the line. It's like, well, the fact that you're creating digital copies of our IP, problem. right? If you scratch build something like the orc shaman,
Yep.
yes, it's a Warhammer orc, but it still falls within the rubric.
It does,
right?
and then obviously anything else they can always consider putting in open,
Right.
and so thankfully there wasn't a whole bunch of it, but I think we're going to see before the next Golden Demon comes around in March.
Another updated.
They might have to. They might have to go even farther.
And I think people are going to
define it.
constantly try to toe that line of what they can get away with.
It's so available now
because it's both accessible and available, and it's easier than learning how to do it or
finding the right bit, and then
exactly. And so I think we're going to see a few times where people are going to be crossing the line a little bit. I think we're going to see a few times where people get away with it without the judges even realizing it. And we're going to see that kind of thing happen.
And it can totally happen.
And no one's even know, right? Yeah. Like the whole scare of like, oh, well, you can't do 3D printed models in tournaments. They're going to come check our models and snap them in half to make sure that they're...
Or drill into them or whatever.
It's just like, no, they're not.
They're not going to do that.
But if it's convincing enough, you could potentially get away with it, is what I'm saying. So it's like, even if it was 3D printed, scan, whatever, if it was good enough and they couldn't tell, you got away with it. You know what I mean?
And then what are you going to then boast when you win?
Right.
Like, haha.
So like if you scanned that exiled vampire model and then printed the exact model and then painted it to the moon and won an award, and it looks exactly like the original model, except this one is 3D printed that you scanned and printed yourself, and no one could tell, then whatever.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how I feel about that. I don't feel anything about it.
I think it's the them scanning it. Cause
then altering it, and then that
because even then there's the difference. It's like, because if they just did a 3D print of that exact model and it was exact replica, it's like if they scanned and got away with it, that means the scanned version they probably had to buy the original version, and then
or borrow it. That'd be funny,
and then didn't modify it, right? So then I don't really think it matters. I think they're doing it and then modifying the IP with an illegal copy technically. So it's kind of a big deal. This wasn't that big of a deal. Who knows if that guy would have even won anything.
Right.
Every category looks pretty loaded to me.
But I think it's at least a good example of like what you're not allowed to do.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as vague as people think. In fact, if you have a bunch of questions about it, don't do it. Look what a lot of these entries were: unmodified models, painted to the moon, built on a sexy base. You don't have to try and cheat some line, and for what? Like, I don't know.
Just make yourself stand out a little bit.
Yeah, and if you're not into the sculpting or whatever, well, just know that like I don't think sculpting really puts you over just a great paint job most of the time. So, so who knows? And there were some guys who are very notable who didn't win awards at this one. I mean, Richard Gray had an entry, only one. Ben Comets had an entry, and they walked away with like pins.
Yep.
But Golden Demon's hard. Golden Demon's hard. Don't try to cheat to get yours there. Just know that it's hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe don't submit it if you submitted it before.
Yeah. And don't resubmit. Okay, yeah. I don't think
because I don't want to see the same models every year.
Right.
Like I don't want to see. No offense, but I'm pretty sure I've seen a very specific green and purple Imperial Knight in almost every painting competition I've ever gone to that allows.
I saw it at least 2 Golden Demons and at Gen Con General.
Yeah, the same model.
Yeah.
I recognize it was the same model, and I'm pretty sure it won awards at every single one of them. And it's like I don't like that.
No.
So.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's like we were talking about that earlier. It's like a comedian who never moves on from the same material you saw 8 years ago, and so you're like, oh, we've heard that one. Okay, and it's like you need to do, and you're an artist, like. You're working on stuff all the time.
And often a lot of these people are full-time artists.
And if you can't get something to the standard you like for that competition, then you skip that one. You just do. You swallow that pill.
And you spoke about Richard Gray. I mean, he talked about that where, if a model's not ready, you don't just submit it anyway.
No.
You wait.
Because since Chicago, he started at least a dozen pieces that he said this might be a Golden Demon entry.
Right.
And like me, I can relate to him. I do a lot of proof of concept stuff and then don't come back to the piece for a while. And so the Eldar Autarch that he submitted, which got a pin at this one, very good looking, but he only chose to submit that one because when he got down to about 2 months before the event, it was the closest thing he had to being done. So he knew he could put in another 40, 50 hours and knock it out. But you're right. You don't try to hurry it done because that's not your best standard. What are you learning then when you go other than I didn't do my best on it?
Right.
Like, do your best and wait until you've got your best before you submit. Even if it means you show up to the competition with your hands in your pockets. Like, it's just,
Yep. That's how it goes sometimes.
Yep. And that was this basically week, like from beginning, folded all the way over to where the burrito closes again at the top.
Completely wrapped up.
Completely tucked in.
I could actually have a burrito, I think.
Is there a limit to what can go in a burrito?
I think the only limit you have is the size of your tortilla.
That's the only limit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can go.
Yeah, let's eat. Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us for more of our weekly episodes on YouTube podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. You can follow myself and Llama on Instagram. We are at Llama Paints Minis and Hyena Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.